The conference room smelled like leather and lies. I sat across from 5 board members who'd spent the last hour explaining why my pregnancy made me a liability to the company I'd helped build from nothing. "We need someone more committed," Board Chairman Walter Hughes said, sliding the termination papers across the mahogany table like they were doing me a favor. "Nothing personal, Jessica. But a CEO can't run a company from a maternity ward." I looked at the papers, then at the men who'd never missed a golf game but questioned my commitment. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a folder they'd never seen coming. Perfect timing. "As majority shareholder, I'm dissolving the board. You're all fired." The silence was so thick you could spread it on toast. Walter's face went from smug to stunned in 3 seconds flat. "You don't have the authority." 51% says I do, I replied, sliding my ownership documents across the same table where they'd just tried to end my career. Meeting adjourned. Forever. But to understand how we got here, me, 7 months pregnant, firing the entire board of directors of my own company, we need to go back 5 years. TechFlow Solutions started in my garage with 3 things: a revolutionary idea for supply chain software, a maxed-out credit card, and a business partner named Marcus Webb, who had the connections I lacked. I had the technical knowledge, the vision, and the 16-hour workdays. Marcus had the network, the MBA from Harvard, and as I'd learn later, the complete absence of a soul. "We'll split everything 50-50, Marcus had promised over beer and pizza in my garage. "Equal partners. Get it in writing," my mother had warned. But I was 26, naive, and believed handshakes still meant something. The first 2 years were brutal but beautiful. I coded until my eyes burned, pitched until my voice gave out, and survived on ramen and determination. Marcus handled the business side, finding investors, sweet-talking clients, and gradually building the image that he was the real brain behind TechFlow. Our breakthrough came when Hartman Industries signed on as our first major client. It was my software, my presentation, my 3 all-nighters that sealed the deal. But at the celebration dinner, Marcus introduced himself as the CEO and me as the technical co-founder, like I was some coding monkey he'd hired. "It's just easier," he explained later. "Old-school clients expect a man in charge. We'll fix it later." Later never came. As TechFlow grew, so did Marcus's ego and my marginalization. He brought in his Harvard buddies as executives. They formed a boys' club that made decisions over whiskey while I was too busy with technical stuff to join. Board meetings were scheduled during my coding sprints. Client dinners happened at clubs that accidentally forgot my invitation. But I didn't care at first. I was building something revolutionary. Our software was saving companies millions, optimizing supply chains in ways nobody had imagined. The code was my baby, and I was proud of what we'd created. The problem started when we needed Series B funding. "The investors are concerned," Marcus told me after a meeting I wasn't invited to. "They want more business leadership, less technical focus." What does that mean? They want to adjust the equity structure. Bring in experienced board members. Dilute our shares a bit for stability. How much dilution? You'd go from 50% to 30%. But don't worry, I'm taking the same cut. I should have walked then. Should have lawyered up, fought back, something. But I was 28, exhausted from coding 18-hour days, and trusted that Marcus would protect our partnership. The papers he had me sign were 60 pages of legal jargon. "Standard stuff," he assured me. "We're both taking the same deal." We weren't. While my shares were diluted to 30%, Marcus's were only cut to 45%. The board seats were filled with his connections. Walter Hughes, his mentor from Harvard, David Chun, his fraternity brother. 3 other men who saw me as the help rather than the co-founder. I discovered the truth 6 months later when our CFO, drunk at the Christmas party, let it slip. "Brilliant move by Marcus," he slurred. "Getting majority control while making you think it was equal. Classic Webb." I confronted Marcus the next day. "It's business, Jess," he said without a hint of shame. "You're brilliant at code, but running a company requires different skills. This protects both of us." "This betrays one of us," I corrected. "Don't be dramatic. You're still CTO, still making great money." "Why rock the boat?" "Because the boat was built on my innovation, steered by my vision, and floating on code I'd written. But with 30% ownership and a board that treated me like Marcus's assistant, I was trapped. Or so they thought. What Marcus didn't know was that I'd learned to play the long game. Every slight, every exclusion, every technical co-founder, introduction just fueled my determination. I started buying shares quietly. Small chunks from early employees who needed cash, options from advisors who'd lost interest. 1% here, 2% there. Why are you wasting money on more equity? Marcus asked when he noticed. You already have enough for a nice payday when we exit. I believe in the company, I said simply. He laughed. That's why I handle the business side. You're too emotional about it. Emotional. Right. Calculating the exact percentage needed for control was definitely emotional. The pregnancy changed everything. My husband Eric and I had been trying for 3 years. When that second line finally appeared on the test, I cried for an hour, happy tears mixed with fear about timing. TechFlow was in acquisition talks. We were about to expand internationally. The board was already skeptical of my technical focus. A baby would give them the excuse they'd been looking for. I told Marcus privately, hoping for support from my co-founder. Congratulations, he said flatly. When are you planning to step down? Step down. I'm having a baby, not retiring. Jess, be realistic. We're at a crucial point. The acquisition talks, the international expansion. We need leadership that's fully committed. I am fully committed. A mother with a newborn can't be fully committed. It's biology. That's when I knew they'd try to force me out. Marcus had been looking for an excuse to consolidate power, and my pregnancy handed him one wrapped in a bow of false concern. I spent the next 3 months preparing. Buying shares became my obsession. I liquidated my savings, sold my investment properties, even borrowed against my 401k. Every percent mattered now. You're being paranoid, Eric said as I executed another purchase at 2 a.m. I'm being prepared, I corrected, calculating that I now held 47%. The board meeting was scheduled for a Thursday. I was 7 months pregnant, visibly showing, and exhausted from growing both a human and my ownership stake. They didn't even pretend it was a regular meeting. No agenda, no financial reports, just 5 men in suits looking somber. Jessica, Walter began, using his disappointed grandfather voice. We need to discuss your future with TechFlow. My future is CEO and majority shareholder, I said calmly. They exchanged glances. Marcus cleared his throat. About that, given your condition, we think it's best for everyone if you transition to an advisory role. My pregnancy isn't a condition. It's a personal matter that doesn't affect my ability to lead. The stress can't be good for the baby, David Chin added, fake concern dripping from every word. We're thinking of your health. How thoughtful. Were you thinking of my health during the 60-hour weeks I pulled to close the Morrison deal? Or when I flew to Singapore with food poisoning to save the Lu contract? This is different, Walter insisted. A CEO needs to be available 24/7. You'll have other priorities. Like Marcus's golf tournaments? David's wine tastings? Your monthly fishing trips? I pulled out my phone. Should I read the board meeting minutes you thought I didn't review? The ones where critical decisions were tabled because half of you were on vacation. We need someone more committed, Walter said, sliding the termination papers across the table. A severance package, 6 months of pay, and a non-compete that would essentially end my career. I looked at the papers, then at Marcus. My co-founder. My partner. The man who'd stolen my company while shaking my hand. You're right, I said finally. You do need committed leadership. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out the folder I'd been preparing for months. Share certificates, purchase agreements, and one beautiful document showing my ownership stake, 51%. Congratulations, gentlemen. You've just attended your last board meeting. Walter grabbed the papers, scanning frantically. This is impossible. Marcus has 45%. Had, I corrected, until he sold 5% to Ventures Capital last month to buy his beach house. That put him at 40%. The board collectively holds 9%. And I've spent 3 years buying every share I could find. 51%. You manipulated, Marcus started. I invested. In my own company. The one you tried to steal. I stood up, my pregnancy making it less graceful than I'd planned, but no less powerful. As majority shareholder, I'm calling an emergency shareholder meeting. Right now. You need proper notice, Walter sputtered. Not for emergency sessions regarding board malfeasance. I pulled out another document. This is a legal opinion regarding the board's attempt to terminate a CEO based on pregnancy. My lawyer says it's textbook discrimination. Worth about $50 million in damages. Unless what? David asked weakly. Unless you all resign. Immediately. Quietly. with nice statements about pursuing other opportunities. The room erupted. Marcus stood up, his face purple. "You can't do this. I built this company." "No," I said calmly. "You built a network. I built the product. And according to corporate law, the product owner with 51% beats the network with 40%. The investors will revolt. The investors care about returns. Our revenue is up 400% since I became CTO. They'll be fine." Walter tried one last gambit. "You'll never run this company without us. You don't have the connections, the experience." "You're right," I agreed. "I don't have connections to other incompetent board members. I don't have experience discriminating against pregnant women. I don't have your particular skills at all." I turned to Marcus. "Clean out your office by tomorrow. Security will escort you." "You're making a mistake," he said, but his voice had lost its confidence. "I made you. Without me, you're just a coder with a garage startup. And without me, you're just a guy with an MBA and a PowerPoint. Guess which one the company actually needs?" The next 24 hours were chaos. Marcus tried to rally the investors, but they'd already done the math. A discrimination lawsuit would tank the valuation. The founder who'd built the actual product had majority control. The smart money stayed quiet. By Friday afternoon, I had a new board. 3 women, 2 men, all chosen for competence over connections. The first meeting lasted 15 minutes. "I'm taking maternity leave in 2 months, I announced. "Here's the coverage plan." "Questions?" "Just one," said Lydia Chin, the new board chair. "Why didn't you fire them sooner?" I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in years. I was waiting for the right moment. Turns out, pregnancy discrimination was the gift that kept on giving. Marcus tried to compete, starting a rival company with the board members I'd fired. It failed within a year. Turns out, when you can't steal someone else's code, you have to actually build something. He sent an email last month, 3 years after that boardroom coup. "Congratulations on the IPO. I always knew TechFlow would succeed." I didn't respond, but I did frame the email, hanging it next to the termination papers they'd tried to serve me. A reminder that sometimes the best response to discrimination isn't a lawsuit. Sometimes it's a hostile takeover of your own company. My daughter is 3 now. She comes to the office sometimes, playing in the on-site daycare I had built. The one that Walter would have called frivolous, and Marcus would have voted against. "Mama's company?" she asks, pointing at the TechFlow logo. "Yes, baby," I tell her. "Mama's company. All 51% of it." The IPO valued TechFlow at $2.8 billion. My stake made me wealthy beyond my wildest dreams. But the real satisfaction came from the press coverage. Pregnant CEO fires board in stunning reversal, and how one woman took back her company. Marcus was quoted in one article, claiming he'd always supported my leadership. The journalist fact-checked him in the next paragraph, citing the discrimination lawsuit I'd threatened. Even in defeat, he couldn't help but lie. "Do you regret how it ended?" a reporter asked me after the IPO. "I regret how it started," I replied. "With a handshake instead of proper contracts. With trust instead of verification. With the assumption that being brilliant at building something meant I didn't need to own it." What advice would you give to other female founders? I thought about all the meetings I'd been excluded from, all the times they'd called me too technical, or too emotional, or too pregnant to lead. "Own your work," I said finally. Not metaphorically. Literally. Own every share you can get your hands on. Because when they try to push you out, and they will try, equity talks louder than any board member. The reporter nodded, scribbling notes. "And the pregnancy? How did you balance motherhood with running $1 billion company?" I smiled, thinking of my daughter napping in the office nursery while I reviewed code. The same way men have been doing it forever. By hiring help, setting boundaries, and never apologizing for being both a parent and a CEO. But as a woman, I had to buy 51% of my own company to keep the job I was already doing. So maybe the question isn't how I balance motherhood and work. Maybe it's why the board thought my uterus affected my ability to read a P&L statement. She laughed, but it was the kind of laugh that comes from recognition, not humor. That's the real lesson here. Not just about ownership or hostile takeovers or corporate coups. It's about what happens when you underestimate someone because they don't fit your narrow definition of leadership. Walter, Marcus, and the others saw a pregnant woman and assumed weakness. They saw a technical founder and assumed limitation. They saw an opportunity to consolidate power and assumed I'd go quietly. They assumed wrong. Now I run board meetings between pediatrician appointments. I review code while pumping milk. I negotiate acquisitions with spit up on my blouse. And somehow, miraculously, the company hasn't collapsed from my divided attention. Almost like being a mother and a CEO aren't mutually exclusive. Almost like they never were. The termination papers they tried to serve me are still in my desk drawer. Sometimes I pull them out and read the severance they offered. 6 months of pay to walk away from the company I built. Then I look at my latest bank statement, showing dividends from my 51% stake. The math is beautiful in its simplicity. They offered me 6 months. I took everything instead. And the baby they were so worried about? She's thriving. Turns out, growing up watching your mother run a billion-dollar company is pretty good for a girl's ambitions. What do you want to be when you grow up? Her preschool teacher asked. A CEO, she said confidently. With 51%. That's my girl. Already understanding that majority control beats minority prejudice every single time. The board never saw it coming. Too busy looking at my belly to notice my brain. Too focused on my pregnancy to track my purchases. Too convinced of their own superiority to imagine I'd been planning their demise with every share I bought. But that's what happens when you mistake pregnancy for weakness. You get dissolved. Voted out. Replaced. By a woman who understood that the best maternity leave policy is owning enough of the company that nobody can fire you for taking it. 51% and a baby. They said I couldn't have both. They were 49% wrong.